I'm attorney Phil Jusino, and this is the Phil Jusino Show. This episode is sponsored by Big Belly Barbecue in Smithtown, the best barbecue on Long Island. If you miss any of my shows, you can always catch it on YouTube by going to the Phil Jusino Podcast. Also, this show will be aired on TV and Cablevision for you Long Islanders, and it'll be on channel 115, 10 o'clock next Thursday. That's the 28th to 8th of December. Tonight's special guest is Matthew Ulloa. Was a client of mine starting out in 2022 until 2023. Welcome aboard, Matthew.
Nice to be on, Phil. Thank you for having me.
Matthew, I represented Matthew in a criminal case, and I'll just tell my viewing audience what had happened. Back on September 1, 2022, Matthew's first day of college at Suffolk Community College, he was jogging westbound on Middle Country Road in the south side of the road when a car pulling into a gas station with three kids in the car almost hit him. Matthew flipped him the bird and kept running. About maybe 4 or 5 miles down the road, Matthew's still jogging on Middle Country Road heading westbound, and the fella that almost hit him got in, pumped his gas, got in his car, traveled down the road. Now, I don't know if he was looking for him or he just saw him on the side of the road, but he pulled into a strip mall, got out, and started chasing Matthew. Matthew had earbuds in his ear. I don't think he jogs with earbuds anymore, but he had earbuds in his ear. He could not hear that man approaching him. And obviously he was jogging westbound. The attack came from behind. And the man grabbed Matthew around the neck. The 4 seconds, and there was a grainy video that was very helpful. 4 seconds into it, they fall to the ground. Matthew's being choked out. The man is saying, apologize. Matthew doesn't know what the heck's going on, but he's apologizing because he doesn't want to be choked out. Pulls out a legal knife. I want to stress a legal knife. And he stabbed him about 10 to 11 times. The attack stopped at some point. The man got up. The man survived. And Matthew ultimately got up, dropped the knife, stayed at the scene until the police came. So that, in a nutshell, is what happened. Now, I don't want to rehash what happened. We're going to go beyond that. But I just had one quick question for you, Matthew. When you were attacked from behind, did you initially have any idea in your head that it was the fellow that you gave the finger to or not?
Well, when he initially grabbed me and he said, say you're sorry, in kind of a very angry, crazed voice, I had thought that it was some kind of junkie crackhead that had seen me and wanted to rob me or hurt me for whatever reason. So I just kind of said, I'm sorry to kind of appease him. But after he had said, why you stabbed me, after I had stabbed him, I kind of put it together in my head after the situation had calmed down a little bit so I could have room to think.
Because you didn't get a good look at him
when
he almost hit you. He was just some guy sitting in a car, and you were jogging right past him.
Yeah, and he had grabbed me from behind, too. I couldn't see his face. So
Now, so you're at the scene. In fact, your mother just happened to be driving by.
Yes.
So she was at the scene as well. And you stayed. You didn't flee. Often when either a crime or an incident, this turned out not to be a crime because you were cleared, but when an incident happens like that, sometimes people flee the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever for 1 second think about cutting and running?
Well, I mean, the thought passed through my mind, but obviously that wouldn't be a good idea because even though I knew I was completely innocent and going to probably get off in the end, that wouldn't look good for me either way.
Right. It would have made the situation worse. So you stay behind, and at some point the police show up.
Yes.
What was going through your mind when you see how many cop cars showed up?
Initially, it was one, I believe, and then they had called in a few others for backup, I guess, along with an ambulance.
Okay. And so they approach you, the police approach you, you're standing there, you had dropped the knife.
Yes.
And what was some of the things or the first things that you remember the police said to you?
They said, "Well, what happened? Where do you know this guy from? Have you met him before? Did you guys have an argument?" And I had told them who I believe he was. I thought he was the guy who had almost hit me when I flipped him off. After a few minutes of thinking about it, I was pretty sure that it was him.
Okay. And then at some point they take you into custody.
Yes.
And that must have been, well, the incident happened about 8 p.m. So this was 8:30 or thereabouts by the time they took you into cuffs. They put cuffs on you and they took you to the car?
Yeah, initially when they saw all the blood on me, they put cuffs on me within the first few minutes. And then
Mhm.
after I was talking to them for a little bit and they realized I was, calm and I wasn't trying to pull anything, they actually took the cuffs off of me until they put me in the car. And they put cuffs back on me right before I got out of the car at the police station.
Okay. And one of the questions is, who's Matthew Ulloa? As I said in the beginning, maybe you missed it. Matthew was a client of mine I represented who was charged with a serious crime. And we're talking about, we're past now the incident. And we're talking about his journey through the criminal justice system. So you get brought back, or you get brought to the precinct.
Mhm.
And at that point, and I hadn't been hired yet. So
Yeah.
you didn't have an attorney. Did the police, and we're not going to get into too much, but did the police ask for your statement, any kind of statement, or what happened?
After a few hours, it was when they asked me for my statement because when I originally got there, the cops had told me
Mhm.
that there were no detectives actually on call. So they had me just sit in a room by myself and basically told me to wait for a few hours until the two detectives actually came in and asked for my official statement.
Now, these officers, were they in uniform?
The detectives or the ones who
Well, the
brought me?
ones who took you to the precinct. They were in
Yes.
uniform, of course,
Yes.
right? Okay. So you end up spending the night.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? And what
Well,
precinct? Was it the
the
sixth?
sixth, yes.
You stayed there that night.
Hmm.
Okay, what was
So
that like?
initially, when I got there was a lot of nerves. Number one, because they had kept me waiting for so long, and they were telling me different little lies, like the police do. I was asking them, "Can I get a shower before I go to sleep?" They're like, "Yeah, we're gonna get you a shower. We're gonna get you a shower." There's no,
Sarcastically? Because you didn't get a shower, did you?
yeah, no, there's no shower. So in the end, they brought me baby wipes to wipe my face and my collar with. And I hadn't actually got to sleep until around 6 a.m. because they had to call the detectives in for a few hours, actually get them in, and then they were asking me questions, going asking him questions, asking the guy's kids questions who he had left in the car when he got out to attack me. So by the time I got to bed after they had fingerprinted me, booked me, took my picture and everything, it had been hours, 6 a.m. by the time I got to sleep.
Okay. So that morning, you get up at some point, or maybe you didn't have much sleep, but
Not too much.
they bring you to court. And I
Mhm.
believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe I was hired in the early morning hours of the day you were taken to court by your mom, called me.
Yes.
So they take you to court, they bring you to Central Iceland, and then somebody interviews you, correct? They
Yep.
ask you some questions. Where do you live? Things like that. They run a rap sheet because that information is given to the judge, who
Yes.
has to make a decision to have you post bail, to hold you without bail, which doesn't happen too often, uh, or just to release you ROR. In your case, it was supervised release.
Yep.
Okay. So at some point, I get hired. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, that day, I don't think I had court. So I had to throw a suit on. I show up to CI. I met your mom. And then I get to see you in lockup.
Yeah.
So they bring you out. And you didn't know you had an attorney, I guess, until you saw me, because you hadn't
Exactly.
spoken to your mother after they took you into custody. So what was that like, meeting your attorney for the first time? I appear.
It was a little odd because I have clearly never been in this type of situation before, but I met you and I was very frustrated and nervous about what was going to happen. I thought that maybe there would be very serious consequences for what I did, even though I was innocent in the end. So it was very kind of nervous and odd.
Okay. So we had a talk as long as I could possibly speak to you,
Mhm.
and then I told you what to expect, and then we would appear before the judge. So then I go into the courtroom and I wait for you. They bring you out, and it's a very big courtroom. It's D11, and I don't know if you could see that your mom was there because they tell you to keep eyes front.
Yeah.
Right? They don't want you waving to mom or anything like that. So you're sitting there. They bring you before the judge. Some words are spoken. Um, were you really processing fully even though it's just a formality at that point? Were you fully processing what was being said, or you were just numb?
Well, the numbness had kind of passed. The first few hours when they took me in, I believe from the dump of adrenaline, even when the cops got there, I was nervous, of course, but I was just a little bit numb from the adrenaline dump. But that night, right before I went to bed, and the next morning was when it really had set in. Like I was very
After you
serious.
were released, of course.
Yeah,
Right. Okay. So you get supervised release, you get out,
yeah,
we speak, and then in the weeks that followed, we would speak more, and we would find out that you were charged with assault in the second degree, which is a D violent felony, which carries a maximum of 7 years.
yeah,
I want to be clear. The knife he had, because sometimes people ask me that, he had a legal knife. So that was never an issue. Because if you remember the Bernie Getz, you weren't even born yet, but the Bernie Getz case, he was cleared based on self-defense, but he went to jail because he had an illegal handgun. If you had an illegal knife, you could have been prosecuted and convicted for that illegal knife. Now, just very briefly, when you bought the knife, you knew it was legal. You made sure of that.
yes, of course. I bought it thinking that I needed a knife for protection, and I figured if something happened when I did need to absolutely use it, then I would most likely be talking to the police. So I need to get a knife that's
Okay.
legal.
And that was a smart thing. And I tell everybody, not just my clients, anybody I talk to, you're going to protect yourself, and you have a legal right. Just like now, it's a lot easier in New York to get a carry permit, but you got to take the class. You just can't buy a gun on the street, stick it in your pocket, and walk around. You'll get arrested. If you get arrested, you would probably go to jail with an illegal handgun. Same thing with a knife. If you could have gone to jail potentially, even if you were cleared on the self-defense
Mhm.
because you had an illegal weapon, but he didn't. So I just want to be clear because I'm often asked that question. Now, what was going through your mind? Um, so it was your first day of college. This all happens, and you try to get back into school.
Mhm.
All right. Now I know I spoke to the legal department at the school, and they said because the case is pending, you are not allowed back,
Mhm.
even though it had nothing to do with the school. It didn't involve the campus. It didn't involve a student. It didn't involve any of that. So how did you try initially, before I got involved a little bit, to get back to school? Did you just like show up, or the school said, "Don't come back right now"?
Well, basically, I just showed up because initially they had no really way of knowing. And that was my first day of class. I go to class, that happens. And then the next few days, well, obviously the day after I had missed class because I was at court. But then the next few days, I just showed up to school and went to class. And obviously, I got a bunch of weird stares, and I was talking to some people. A rumor was spreading around the campus that there was this kid that was on the news who had stabbed somebody. And then when the administration had finally caught wind of that after a few days, then they had called me in, and with one of the deans and a campus security officer, they basically told me, get lost.
Okay. And then I guess at some point I was notified.
Mhm.
I spoke to legal, and again they said, and I even offered to send them the video. I said, look, I was talking to an attorney. I said,
Yeah.
to an attorney, look at the video, draw your own conclusion that my guy is not a danger to anybody on that campus, unless of course they attack you.
Yeah.
But there was no reason to fear you. It wasn't like you committed a burglary or you attacked a woman. No, that was not the case. They did not want to hear it. I guess they have their rules, but unfortunately, because of that, you missed 2 semesters.
Yeah.
We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but you missed 2 semesters. Now, you mentioned the media. Now, I remember early on, Channel 12 News did a story about it, and Newsday did a story about it. But I want to give Newsday kudos because they got it wrong initially.
Mhm.
The story was out that you had argued with the man, and then you stabbed him. I remember Channel 12 News had a reporter in front of a 7-Eleven
Yeah.
and was telling people, just like random people on the street, well, these 2 men argued and that the defendant stabbed the other man,
Mhm.
which was not true. It did not happen that way. Newsday did the same report. So the reason why I give Newsday kudos, I got your permission,
Yeah.
and I called Newsday, and I spoke to the reporter, and I said, your story is incorrect. It's inaccurate. Basically, what are you talking about? I
Yeah.
said, I'm going to send you a video. And you let me do that. And I said, take a look at the video. The reason I did this, to clear the record, and because those people are potential jurors out there. Now, I don't want to taint the jury pool, but I got to correct the record.
Mhm.
Because if I did nothing, or if Newsday didn't let me do that, All those people out there have the preconceived notion that you argued and then you stabbed the guy in anger. Those people could be jurors
Mhm.
and have that, again, preconceived notion going in there that you're a violent guy. And I couldn't allow that. So Newsday they did a retraction and they interviewed me. And I was able to tell your story. I didn't have them interview you. I had them
Yeah.
interview me. And that set the Channel 12 News, we couldn't really do anything about. But that's why it's very important for citizens out there to sometimes take with a grain of salt what you hear from the media. I don't care whether it's CNN, CSNBC, Fox News. Think. Don't just take it face value, because here the media is making you the villain. And without, let's say, an attorney fighting for you, they're left with that opinion. And they might be left with that opinion anyway.
Yeah.
But this way, at least people who read Newsday might have said, "Oh, I remember that story. Oh, okay. Now I understand it better." So did people ever come up to you and say, "Oh, I saw you in the news"?
Yeah, a couple people had actually come up to me, one at the gym and one at the Smith Haven Mall, and told me, I saw you on the news. What happened? What's the real story?" Because some people actually do know, the news's main goal is to generate clicks for their website, get as many eyes on their content as possible. So a lot of people do know that usually they don't have the full story.
Right.
But specifically, a bunch of people that I would see in public that I used to go to high school with, because this was only a few months after graduating. If I ever saw them in public, they would come up to me and
Sure.
ask like what happened. So it was a little
Okay.
bit stressful with a few people knowing.
Right.
And
You were not that far removed from high school.
yeah, and it was a little bit stressful with some of my friends' parents. Obviously, my close friends knew I had told them the story. They knew I was innocent. They knew who I was. But just going into their houses, they had to go explain to their parents, because a lot of their parents watch the news.
Right.
They had to go explain to their parents, hey, it's that guy from the news that stabbed somebody, but they had
Mhm.
the wrong story. He's actually a good guy. So it was a little nerve-wracking, a little stressful, but I got past it.
Okay. And again, this is something that you didn't bring on yourself.
Mhm.
It was kind of thrust upon you.
Yeah.
And you had to deal with it. Now, early on, you and I spoke, because we had a lot of discussions. I spoke to your mom at some point, and pretty much made it clear to me, and we had this discussion, that you didn't want to take a plea,
Correct.
that you were innocent, you had self-defense, so we can get into that a little bit, but it was self-defense, you didn't do anything wrong, and why should you take a plea? And I agreed with you.
Mhm.
So here we're going through the system, and look, the DA wasn't trying to throw the book. Let's be honest, they weren't, right? And I'm not knocking the DA. Obviously, I didn't think this case should be brought, but they have a job to do. I'm a former prosecutor,
Yeah.
so I can speak from experience. And they wanted some kind of plea. It wasn't even so much that they were going to ask for jail. They wanted some kind of plea, and you kept telling me, "No, I don't want to take any kind of plea."
Correct.
Now, I let you know, with a misdemeanor, the case is not presented to the grand jury. With a felony, which this is a felony, that gets presented. There's only two ways to prosecute you. One is a grand jury indictment or a superior court information. So if you take a plea, you sign a document where you allow them to prosecute you by superior court, and you don't get indicted. But here, I said to you, the case gets presented to the grand jury. The grand jury, of about 16 to 23 people, have to make a decision whether or not there's probable cause to believe you committed the crime, and whether or not, not guilt or innocence, but whether or not the case goes forward. And I said to you, I think we got a good chance at knocking it out at the
Mhm.
grand jury, because then you don't have to go to trial. And I said, but if you're indicted and we go to trial, you could be looking at 7 years. So you knew that early on,
Correct.
right? And you never wavered. I got to be honest. I have a lot of clients with serious charges, and some of them have culpability, and some of them don't. But some of them, I've had, say, "Hey, look, if I go to trial, I don't want 7 years. I'll take the damn plea,"
Mhm.
and they'll plead to something just to get out of it, and you didn't. So the case drags on for a while. We have a number of appearances. We even met with the district attorney. A little unusual,
Yeah.
but we did, right? And I thought it was a good idea. They were good about it, right? We met in a room, a conference room in the county court building. They had a detective investigator there, two prosecutors, and we talked about the case. Right? And again, I knew from the beginning, I didn't guarantee you, but I was pretty confident that you would not be convicted if it went to trial, or that you probably wouldn't even be indicted.
Correct.
So we had this meeting, and I thought that was going to turn the tide, but they still decided to prosecute
Yeah,
you.
that was
Okay.
a little strange.
Uh, I was hoping that at that point they would realize that the guy had lied,
Hmm.
that he said, we argue. That was a lie. And that's why the video, because sometimes people come to me and they say, I got a video, I got an audio. Not every video or audio totally clears a person. But here, the only thing I was looking at, the video, grainy, not a great angle, was that there was no argument. That's all I needed. That's all I needed because that's what I think the grand jury also focused on, your credibility.
Yes.
So anyway, case drags on for a while, and at some point I say, Matthew, they're going to present the case to the grand jury.
Yep.
I had sent a letter to the district attorney. In fact, one of the sentences I said, I bet my reputation that my client will not be indicted. I don't usually say that unless I mean it. So I get you prepared, and I said, you're going to testify, and you confirmed, testify in the grand jury. Now, dare I say, most attorneys would not put their client in the grand jury. You're the only client that I ever put in the grand jury where I didn't know the outcome. What do I mean by that? I may have somebody who's giving information, turning state's evidence or doing something like that, where I know my client's going to get immunity or he's going to be cleared based on his testimony. We went in there not knowing the outcome.
Yep.
And that was courageous on your part. And I, in a sense, made that decision or advised you based on everything I knew about the case. So the day we go in, we waited for a while. Remember?
We did.
We're outside. The detectives are in. They're testifying. The complaining witness must have testified, I think, a different day because he wasn't there that day. And we're sitting, and then we move closer, remember? And we're sitting right outside the grand jury room.
Yep.
And we were both pretty calm. We're just chatting. And it's our turn to go in. Now, just so you know, my audience, at a grand jury, I can go in with my client, but as a defense attorney, I might as well have a gag around my, some kind of gag around my mouth because I am not allowed to say anything in that room. This is not a trial. The grand jury is the tool of the prosecutor. You might have heard the saying, you can indict a ham sandwich. I know you did. We talked about that. Meaning, pretty much if the prosecutor wants an indictment, they can get it, depending on how it's presented. But here, they present, and again, I was in the grand jury only for when Matthew testified. So I can't say how the complaining witness came off, how the detectives came off. I know they showed the video, and then we walked out, and I said, I just want to ask my client another question or two about, I think it was college, and it was some other issue. And they were good about that. Like I said, I had no problem with the DA's office, other than they prosecuting you.
Yeah.
But so we went back in. You answered the question. Remember, they showed you the knife
Yes.
and all of that. And we got to see, because it's almost like a theater. It goes up, and again, 16 to 23 people of all walks of life. Right? And the prosecutors are in there. It is their show.
Mhm.
I'm a spectator, but you testified. What was it like for you when you walked into the grand jury knowing the potential consequences of being indicted?
Well, it was definitely a little nerve-wracking having all the attention on me with the prosecutors kind of shoving it down my throat, trying to kind of make me look guilty a little bit, kind of accusing me of something I didn't do. I believe at one point they said that they were asking me if I went back at him.
Right. That was an
told them
issue.
no.
And the video, my take of the video was you didn't. You gestured a little bit,
Mhm.
but it wasn't as if you went to do anything. Their version was a little bit different than mine,
Yep.
but you're right. That was an issue early on. And you answered the question.
I said no.
You said no. And again, I got to say, again, first time I ever went into the grand jury not knowing the outcome, but you did do very well. I got to say, and I told you that. You did very well because, you know the expression, when you're telling the truth, you don't have to have a great memory.
Yeah.
Because, what did I say last time? Did I change that? Or what am I lying? You never wavered. That's why I didn't have a problem putting you in the grand jury. Because if I thought you were wishy-washy, I would have said, you're not going in.
Yeah, it was pretty clear from the start. The more evidence they got, the more it pointed to the fact that they couldn't convict me of anything. So I was reasonably confident.
Right. But there's always that thing in the back of your head saying, what are they seeing? Again, I don't know how the complaining witness came off. I know the statements and I read them 100 times.
Hmm.
So I knew that once they heard from you, they had to come to the conclusion he was lying.
Yeah. I mean, I went in knowing that I was going to tell the truth and that he had lied, because if he had told the truth, it would have gotten thrown out anyway. And I was struggling to understand how he would even go into that grand jury hearing and rationalize it to a group of like-minded citizens, let alone rationalize it in his own head why he would go after me like that.
Well, you know what? I think it could also be that sometimes people believe their lies,
Yeah.
right? Like they convince themselves, or things happen. Like, look, if you look back, and again, we're not going to relive that particular incident, but you got to admit some of that is a blur because it happened very fast.
Yes.
It's not like you're watching something happen and you can process it. You were hit, attacked in a sense from behind. Things happen, and that video helped.
Definitely.
Look, without the video, I still think there was a reasonable chance of you not being indicted. But with that video, and you got very lucky because the camera that was closer to the paneling store didn't work. That would have had a better view, and it was dark out. If you look at the video, it's almost like, you ever see, is that Bigfoot?
Yeah, it's pretty hard to see, but it's
But
clear enough.
But I was happy when I saw it because the night, I'm trying to think again when I got hired, because was it a weekend? You had a day of school, but I think the next day was a weekend, if I'm not mistaken, because I
No.
remember, well, maybe it was, we met at the paneling store. Okay. Now I remember. I went to the paneling store.
Mhm.
And don't forget, when the detectives arrested you, or the police rather, they did not have the video yet
Correct.
because the store was closed. And they didn't know what they were going to find. So they arrested you based on what the complaining witness said. I went, I think it was the next day or the day after, I went to the paneling store. And I think I met you and your mom there in the parking
Correct.
lot.
That was a Friday, I believe.
Okay,
That we met.
then it was a Friday. I went into the paneling store and I spoke to one of the guys there. And he said, yes, we have a video. He said, I saw the video. And he said, your client was attacked from behind. Felt great at that point.
Yeah.
And then I was able to get the video, share it, and the DA got a copy of it, obviously. But I said, what about the other camera? And they said that wasn't working, which would have been a better angle.
Would have been perfect.
Right. This one, though, again, it got what we wanted. It got what we needed. That's all sometimes you take away with what you can get. And that was very, very helpful. Now, so after you come out of the grand jury and we walked out and we said goodbye. And how did you feel? Because we didn't get a decision. It's not like a jury comes out and at some point, has the jury reached a verdict? Yes, we have. Not like that. I get a phone call from the DA. And it didn't happen immediately. It was a number of days after that. From that time you walked out of the grand jury till you got my call with the good news, what was going through your mind?
Well, I was a little nervous, of course, but I was trying to rationalize it in my own head as much as I could. Like, what kind of citizen would sit there and watch that video and really choose that I need to go to trial? Because I feel like most people would watch that video and say, that kid's the victim.
And that was my conclusion. But again, I'm a little biased.
Yeah, me as well.
I'm your attorney, and you're the defendant at that time. But you had to get up every morning, waiting for the decision.
Yep.
Which took a little while to come, but we ultimately got it. So I call you, and I say I got good news. And I still remember that day. I was in my office when I got the call from the assistant DA, and I wasn't surprised. And I got the news. We spoke a little bit, and then I called you and I gave you the good news. How did you feel at that moment?
I was so relieved, like a big weight had gotten lifted off of my shoulders, like I could stand up more straighter. I was just thinking about the future, like I can go back to college when I apply for jobs, because that whole time when I had applied for jobs while the case was going on, they would find it in the background check and they would ask me, like, what happened, and I would have to explain to them the whole thing and then show them the video. I knew after this they wouldn't find anything, I wouldn't have to worry about it. So it was very relieving.
Okay. But and then your mugshot. I'm sorry, sometimes when they Google, I don't know if it was readily available at that time.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, because I know in some cases you can Google somebody and the mugshot, especially if a case makes the papers. Now you were 19 at the time.
18. I was
18.
freshly 18.
Okay, 18 years old. Okay, and so a year ago, 8-9 months go by. You finally cleared. How soon thereafter, did you apply? You had to apply for college again? How did that process work?
Well, I had to re-register to Suffolk. If I remember correctly, I don't believe I had to apply because I already applied and got accepted. And furthermore, with a community college, you're gonna get like 99% of people are gonna get accepted. So I basically just registered for classes, and actually they had called me and said, "You can't go. You have this hold still on your account." So I had to go all the way to the Riverhead Court or Islip. I believe I went to Riverhead first, and they told me no, it was transferred to Islip or the other way around. And I got the document and I had to email it over
Like a
to them.
certificate of disposition.
Yeah.
It's
The
like
first time I
$5.
went, I had driven all the way over like 45 minutes an hour. They give me the paper, I go home, I email it. They call me the next morning to school. They say, "Oh, it's not certified. Like there's no signature." So I had driven all the way over like all that time just for them to forget to put the seal on it.
Oh,
I had
jeez.
to go all the way back.
Okay. But you got back. You're back
Yeah.
at the school, and you're going to school. You're taking your classes.
Yeah.
You're getting on. You had toyed with the possibility of going to the military.
Yeah.
I know. I know at some point.
Maybe in the future, hopefully.
Overall, what is your opinion of the criminal justice system? You had a unique perspective,
I did.
and one that had a happy ending, of course. But what is your overall view of the criminal justice system?
Well, I don't really like it just because even if you're innocent, the going through the system is the punishment. If you're innocent, you still have to go through all these months of waiting. You have
Hire an
to pay
attorney,
money,
pay an attorney.
and I really realized the definition is kind of skewed. It's called the justice system, but I realized even from the beginning, the prosecutors knew I was innocent. They knew that they couldn't convict me
Well,
of anything.
that's your opinion. Again,
Yeah,
you
that is
have a
my
right to that
opinion.
opinion, but they
That is my
felt
opinion.
otherwise. I just want to be fair.
They did feel otherwise, but it kind of puts into perspective. It's not really a justice system, in my opinion. It's more of a legal system because
Okay,
justice
that's
is kind
fair.
of
Now, do you think, in your opinion, the fact that this was a case in the media
Mhm.
had any bearing on how the prosecutor, and again, opinion, how the prosecutor handled this case, that there was maybe a little pressure on them to proceed in a certain way? Do you think that was in play?
Yes, definitely. I can certainly sympathize with them a little bit because their career is kind of on the line. If they if they had gotten my case after it was on the news and immediately dropped it, they can look kind of silly. This guy stabbed someone 11 times
Well,
and
because
you're
it was
just going to let him
stabbing, right?
go. So I can definitely sympathize and see their their thought process on that, not immediately dropping it.
So you think it may have where they right. Look, and I don't disagree with you because case comes in. If it had no coverage whatsoever, nobody
Yeah.
other than the complaining witness. Like there are some cases where, and I think this, from what I was told, this complaining witness wanted you to be punished
Correct.
severely. There are cases where, let's say it's a DWI, when nobody's hurt, nobody's kicking and screaming. So the
Yeah.
prosecutor, and especially if it doesn't make the papers, the prosecutor can take maybe a different position. Say, okay,
Definitely.
no one's knocking on my door, nobody's calling me, and don't forget, I was in those shoes. Nobody's calling me, nobody was hurt, and maybe I give a different. But here you had a complaining witness. It's in the media, so. And I always say, as a defense attorney, as long as my client's not in jail, let some time go by.
Yeah.
Or if he's in jail and I know that he may be staying there for a while, but let some time go by. It distance is the case from the media. It distances itself a little bit from the anger that the person, the complaining witness, felt on September 1, September 2, and thereafter. So I always said, and I said to you many times, let some time go by. You're out of custody.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, I know you want to go back to school and maybe join the military at that point, but you're free. Let some time go by and let it play out. And everything I told you, this is a plug for me, I'm only kidding, but pretty much everything I told you played out that way.
Yeah. Very experienced. You know what you're doing.
Good. And you were a great client because you took my advice. I have some clients that don't always take my advice, but I think here you did. So you just talked a little bit about the criminal, you call it the justice or the criminal system.
Yeah.
Right?
The legal system, I like to call it.
If you, and I always use this, in effect, some of my guests, I use this term, if you were king for a day, right, what improvements do you think the criminal, I'll call it the criminal justice system, could undergo to make it a better system, at least from your perspective?
Well, the biggest thing is definitely the goal of the prosecutor, because the goal of the prosecutor is they get a case, and their job is to convict, push that the defendant is guilty. I know in some other countries, I believe, if I remember correctly, Romania, in their justice system, the job of the prosecutor is not to mainly prosecute, it's to actually discern the truth of the situation and actually serve true justice, whether this person is innocent or not.
Okay. Well, as a prosecutor, when I was a prosecutor, we're held to, believe it or not, a higher standard than the defense attorney.
Okay.
Not that defense attorneys aren't held to a standard, but the prosecutor should be looking for the truth. Now, don't forget how a case comes into a prosecutor. The police make an arrest.
Yeah.
They do what they have to do. They get a confession, they get a statement, they get a video, they take witness statements, and then they present that to the district attorney. So when I was in the prosecutor's office, I didn't make the arrest. I didn't necessarily, initially anyway, talk to the witnesses. That comes later.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to discern from what they receive from the police what's true and what's not. And it's not always that easy to do.
Yeah.
Now, think about cases like people watch these TV shows and there's DNA. Like if you watch Forensic Files, there's usually DNA or there's something greater than the word of a complaining witness, right?
Yes.
So in a criminal case, and the prosecutor gets the case, they have to say, okay, what do I got here? But you're right. They held to a higher standard, but you're right. They should look for the truth, and where they don't see it or where there's inconsistencies, because they know to convict you, it's beyond a reasonable doubt.
Correct.
So it's not a civil case, preponderance of the evidence, or clear and convincing higher than preponderance. Beyond a reasonable, at the highest standard of any other kind of case, because your liberty's at stake. So if they believe they can't make the case, they should drop it, wouldn't you say?
I would say that is correct, but they did not do that. They pushed it all the way to the grand jury.
Right. Now, sometimes, and I'm not accusing this particular office, but there are some offices that, especially if you have certain types of prosecutors, that might say, you know what? Rather than me dump the case and look bad, let's present it to the grand jury. Let them be the bad guys.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that happened here, but there are some prosecutors that present the case. Like, why do you think police officers like bench trials as opposed to jury trials? Because they feel that they have a better shot with the judge.
Of course.
Right? But often those cases don't even make it to a judge because the case is presented to the grand jury. And again, if a case is presented in such a way, you might not have an indictment. And then the DA could say, well, we didn't clear them. Those people in that room did.
Yeah, not our fault.
Not our fault. So it's somewhat of a way to cover themselves, as opposed to taking the hard position and saying, I'm going to kick this case. I don't believe that complaining witness. I saw the video. I'm not prosecuting. And I don't care what. Let the complaining witness call Newsday. Let him call Channel 12 News. I don't care. Because I made a decision.
Yeah, that's what I think they should have done. I think after the video, I believe it was clear to them what the outcome would be. I thought that they were going to drop it, even though it doesn't look too good for their careers. I don't think it would have looked horrible for their careers, considering the video and the outcome was pretty clear. But I thought that they would have sympathized with me a little bit, because I was telling them, like, I missed my first semester of college. I was hoping that I could go to the second and get it cleared.
We were hoping, but it didn't.
They didn't sympathize
happen
with me at all. They said, we don't care that.
Well, the complaining witness was out of the country for a period of time.
Right.
And we were hoping to get it by Christmas or like the beginning of January so you could go back to school.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was presented in May of this year. So you lost 2 semesters.
Yeah, super unfortunate, but I do have some college credits from high school, so I did get off to a head start, I guess I could say. So it's not all bad.
I want to bring this up because I think it's important since we're talking about the criminal justice system. I think you'd appreciate this. I had a trial the other day, a bench trial, meaning no jury. And I was cross-examining the complaining witness, the DA's only witness. The complaining witness is the person who's alleging my client committed a crime or violation against him. And I thought I was doing very well, and I caught him in a lie. Right? And based on a police report I had, it was either he's lying or the cop's lying. And I didn't think for 1 second. In this particular case, the cop was lying. We had a break in the action, and I'm walking to my car, and I get a phone call from the prosecutor. And going through my head, did my client do something? Did he make a face to the guy as they walked out of the building? Did he, what do you do? Because you don't usually get, I've been doing this 34 years.
Okay.
I don't get too many phone calls from the DA as I'm walking, unless it's like a scheduling issue.
Yeah.
I can't, I can't find my witness or whatever the case is. And he says to me, the complaining witness lied on the stand. I never got that call before. And I thought that shows integrity, and Suffolk County District Attorney showed integrity. Because if he doesn't make the call, how do I know? Right? I still think I would have won the case, but how do I know? So the fact that I got that call, we addressed it with the judge. Believe it or not, the case still went on, which was a little surprising to me, because there's a thing called the vouching rule, where if you put somebody on the stand, if I put somebody on that stand,
Yeah.
I have to vouch for their credibility. There are exceptions, but I'm saying I believe what that person's saying. If that's their only witness, and you're telling me he lied, how does the case go forward? Finish the case, and I ask for a trial order of dismissal. That's before I even present my case. And again, legally I don't have to, but I was about to present my case. The judge dismissed the case, and that was done. So that's an example of where the DA's office showed integrity and told me that somebody had lied on the stand, which allowed me to factor that in. Okay? So are there any other suggestions, even going way back, like did the police treat you, do you believe that the police treated you fairly?
Yeah, I believe. Well, some of the police officers were a little bit sarcastic, a little bit demeaning, but most of them, it was my arresting officer and the detectives were very kind to me. I think they kind of knew what happened, even when I made the, I guess you could say, foolish decision to make a statement without you present. They were asking me certain things that they wanted to put in my statement. They were asking me, "Did you fear for your life? Did you fear for your life?" And I told them, "Yeah, I did fear for my life." So they were helpful, definitely.
Okay, right. And I got to say, throughout this whole ordeal for you, I never had any issues with the police department. They took the statements, they did their job, they got the video, which we also got. So I didn't have any issues with them. I don't think the prosecutor was really looking to hurt you, but I think they felt that they had to get some kind of plea out of you because a guy was stabbed 11 times.
Yeah.
So you don't usually see someone stabbing someone 11 times and getting off scot-free.
Yeah.
You don't see that every day.
Yeah, a little bit rare.
Mhm.
But the one problem I had with the prosecutors that really made me say, I really don't like these people, is after it had actually ended, after it had been disposed, no true bill, when we were trying to get the...
You're using the right terminology. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I taught you well.
Yeah, I also took
And
a
you did your
criminal
homework.
justice class,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, good.
After it had ended, we were supposed to get the form for release to release all my personal
I
items.
remember that.
We were trying, I think you had asked the prosecutor, I don't want to name names, but the female prosecutor, you had asked her to send it over. I believe you asked her twice. She didn't do it. And I had even called
Your
her
property,
office.
including the knife.
Yeah, my property. I had called her office as well and asked them to send it over. I was communicating with the police headquarters in Yaphank that has had all my stuff. And they kept telling me it's not getting sent over. It's not getting sent over. By the time that they had finally sent over the release, they had thrown my stuff in the trash. So I never got it back.
Right. And I spoke to the district attorney, the male, and he had said he had sent over the property release, and I'll take him at his word.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it got messed up. A couple of things. Jerry Ehrlich from Philadelphia says, "Happy Festivus." He had asked me about where my pole was, and I said I should put one up, Feats of Strength. And D. Hilvritis is watching, Dorothy Hill, Mary Beth Harris is watching, Samantha Robinson is watching, Ellen Hockvis, Gary Jacobs, Cindy Kelly. I really appreciate it. Palma Fonseca, Brian Hellum. I really appreciate the support watching this show. When I thought about, because the last show I did, I had John Ray on. We talked about the Gilgo Beach murders. And criminal justice system is very interesting.
Yes.
It's just that's why people watch these types of movies. They watch forensic. I love it's a half hour because my attention span can't watch some of these shows for that long. But it's a half hour, and it's a good show. In fact, that's shorter than my show. But the reason I wanted to do this, because again, we didn't rehash all that, the incident itself on September 1, peripherally. But it's important that people out there see someone like yourself going through the criminal justice system. I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, like I said, the police didn't treat you badly. Like I said, we're not bashing the prosecutor. We have an opinion that it shouldn't have gone forward, but again, that's their opinion. Just like I made decisions when I was a prosecutor to have cases go, and I always made a decision based on the information that I had. But you came out of this okay.
I did, thankfully.
Right? I could be talking to you from a jail cell, right? Or you could have taken a plea that, let's say, affects you profoundly going forward. So here, yes, it was 8 months that it took, right? About 8 months or so out of your life. Let's put it this way. It was your butt was in a sling. Mine wasn't. But I thought about this often because I feel a sense of responsibility. I represent a lot of criminal defendants. And I remember when, I don't know if you remember this, the Menendez case, where these two boys, two rich, spoiled little brats, killed their parents. I think he was like a movie executive. And they were questioning interviewing one of the attorneys. It was a little woman with blonde hair. She almost looked like she had like Little Orphan Annie. And they said to her, "What is it like? Is it frightening when you're representing people who are guilty?" And her answer is my answer. No. It's when you represent somebody who you believe is innocent or has a legal defense. That's scary. Because if I have a client that's guilty of sin, I'll represent him. I'll do the best I can for him. I'll mitigate the damages as best I can. But if he does jail, that's the system. He committed or she committed a crime. When I got someone like you, I'm like, oh my God, imagine if this kid is convicted and goes to jail, or other clients. So it's always frightening for a defense attorney that has a client that he believes is innocent, because he sees there's only so much I can do. Here, I did everything I could and it worked. But sometimes it's not that easy. What if we didn't have the video? What if there were 3 witnesses that said something different than the truth?
Yeah.
What if you were a bad witness? I have some clients that could be innocent, but they're their own worst enemies because they don't shut up, or they speak too much, or they say the wrong thing. They come across as guilty. They wise off to the police. Never do that. And you didn't do those things, so you made my job a little bit easier.
I would hope so.
But going through the system. But do you, in your day, you're going to college, right? Mm-hmm. Since going back, has anybody said anything to you?
Yeah, a few friends have said a few things to me, and I do get a few strange looks because while I got kicked out, I had a lot of friends who were still going to that school on that campus, and they were telling me that people were talking about it a lot, how people didn't know if this kid was still going to school or not. But it's been pretty relatively normal, no major hiccups, I would say.
Okay, good. So now as you go about your day, do you think back to the incident? Do you think back to how your life was, in a sense, changed for 8 months or even longer?
I do think about it a lot. I think about it every day, but at the end of the day, I believe an experience like that definitely matures you and it definitely wakes you up. At the end of the day, I am actually glad that I was able to experience that because it really matured me. Without that, I think I'd be a lot more immature than I am today.
Now, you said you took a criminal justice class.
I did.
Where, in high school?
In college.
Well, you only had one day of college, but you took college classes?
I went back. I just finished my first semester.
Okay, recently?
Yes.
Okay, so you hadn't taken that class when you were going through this?
Correct.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. Where did you learn more? From this case or that criminal justice class?
Definitely the case, because
Okay.
it's definitely a lot more real, and you definitely take in the information on a different level and automatically memorize it when it's actually yourself going through it.
Did you find that this experience helped you in that class?
Yeah, a little bit. I knew a little bit about the grand jury, the supervised release, and how you get booked and stuff. So yeah, it helped me a little bit.
Did you come across as a know-it-all in the class because you had been through this?
I did not.
Did
I
you tell your
didn't.
professor? Did your professor know about your experience?
I don't think he knew. I did ask him a few questions that maybe he could put together in his head. I asked him how often a grand jury case comes back as no true bill, and he said not very
Not
often.
very often.
And I asked him, because we were discussing about purchasing a firearm as a felon, and I went up to him after class one day and I asked him what would happen if someone was charged with a violent felony, but then the case was never, they were never convicted, the case was dropped. Could the state use that as reasons to not give that person a firearm? And he said they couldn't use that as a reason. And he asked me why, and I just said I just want to know. I didn't go out
Oh,
and tell him.
so your professor, male,
Yes,
had no idea that you had gone through this
correct.
ordeal.
I mean, maybe if he had seen it on the news, maybe he remembered, but he didn't mention it to me.
Why didn't you? Was there a reason why you didn't bring it up? Because that could have been a topic of discussion.
I thought about it. It definitely would have been an interesting topic of discussion for the class, but I didn't want to put a big target on my back. You know, I don't like the attention. I wouldn't like the attention that much at school, definitely.
Mhm. So you could just imagine if, let's say, this case, and it did have media attention, it wasn't worldwide or nationwide attention, but imagine a person who has a case. Like, let's talk about, I think it's Daniel Penny, the Marine that ended up killing a guy on the train because the guy was going crazy and he subdued him.
Mhm.
Now, that was national news. And that guy is still, he was indicted, I believe. He's still going through the system. Imagine what you went through with News 12 and Newsday only.
Yeah,
So imagine if you made Channel 2, Channel 4, Fox News, CNN. Imagine how your life could be very different.
yeah, that would have been definitely a lot worse. I definitely
Mhm.
sympathize with Daniel Penny is his name,
Yes.
because from everything that I've read on that, it seems to be, at least in my opinion, a reasonable. He seems like a reasonable person. You know.
And look, he didn't get up that morning and say, I'm going to kill a black guy on the train.
Yeah.
Just like cops. Sometimes they get into a situation and it escalates, but they don't get up in the morning and say, I want to kill somebody today. I want to shoot. That's the last thing that a police
Yeah.
officer wants to do is discharge his gun, because then there's going to be paperwork and all that. I remember when I was in college, I had to subdue somebody on this must have been 85, thereabouts. I had to subdue somebody, and it didn't end badly. I just held the person until a cop showed up.
Okay.
Well, actually, the person attacked the cop, female cop, transit, and I was able to hold the person with a full Nelson. I was a wrestler, and I held them. But nowadays, you have to think long and hard about jumping in.
Yeah, definitely. The self-defense laws, especially in this state, a little bit too, what's the word, liberal for my liking, I would say.
See, in your case, you stabbed somebody 11 times. Now, obviously, if you went up to somebody randomly and did that, you'd be in jail for a long time.
Oh yeah.
But self-defense, because he was met, Mr. Ulloa, Daniel, was Matthew, was met with force. In a sense, deadly force. You were being choked. And in fact, I don't know if my producer had put that up on the screen, but that was something we had them bring out at the grand jury also. That was one of the things. Remember, we said we want to make sure that that comes out, and you had some questions, that you had the marks on your neck.
Yeah.
From being choked. So that was another piece of evidence that the DA had early on.
Yeah, I don't believe they had it initially. I believe.
We gave it to them.
Yeah, we did give it to them.
But I'm saying fairly early on.
Yeah, they had it way
In fact,
before
about
the
that
grand jury.
meeting, right? Way before the grand jury meeting. So that was another piece of evidence. But that's why nowadays, when I was growing up, there were no cameras.
Yeah.
Unless you did something like when the news was on, there were no cameras. Nowadays, everybody has video, audio capabilities.
Yeah.
Even the poorest person has. You see people coming over the border and from Mexico or wherever, and they have a cell phone.
Yeah.
So just about anything you do can be videotaped, especially if it's in broad daylight. What I find very interesting is I had a case in the mall, and I went there because there was a fight between Macy's and the rest of the mall, Smith Haven.
Yeah.
And the issue was, were there cameras? There are. Do you know how many cameras weren't working? I couldn't get one camera.
Really?
Yeah, the sunglass hut or whatever it was. Macy's, another one. And I spoke to a security officer who I represented at one point in a non-criminal matter, and he said, "Oh, a lot of them are broken." Well, look at in your situation.
Thankfully,
There
one
was a
working.
perfect camera at the right angle that wasn't working.
Yeah, most cameras, not most, but some are definitely an intimidation tactic.
Yeah. See, nowadays it's like a lot harder to commit a serious crime because think about it. They have cell phone pinging.
Yeah.
Right? They have cameras. They can triangulate where your phone was. That's why I think in Idaho, I think it was the murder, where he got rid of his cell phone. Because if he had it on him, they could triangulate where he may be.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a lot harder nowadays to commit a crime because you have cell phones, you have videos. You do have cameras, right? And look how many, I dare I say, Ring cameras have been more instrumental in either clearing people or convicting people. I've had cases with a Ring camera because it's your front door and things can happen. And a lot of times people don't realize that. But a lot of cameras are broken in these malls, but people have, even the smallest house has cameras. You know, I have a Ring and others, but that's how sometimes people get tripped up or cleared.
Cameras are definitely a good thing if you're innocent.
Right. I had a camera, body camera, helped me get a better deal because the officer said one thing, but yet if you looked at the body camera, my client didn't look that intoxicated or that high. So I've had a number of cases where videos, the one I said that I won that case recently,
Yeah.
I got a video into evidence. There was a video of, again, a little bit from a distance, grainy, but that was it. But look, Matthew, I really want to thank you for coming on. This was a great view, in a sense, of the criminal justice system from somebody that went through it from start to finish. But you came out, in a sense, I got to say, unscathed.
Of course.
Right? You could have been punished. You could have taken a plea. And this is something that you're never going to forget. And I think it gives you an appreciation that most people, I've never, other than representing people, I've never gone through the criminal justice system personally.
Yeah.
Thank God, knock on wood. But I really want to thank you for coming on. I think our audience, I saw a lot of people watching the show. And one second, investigate family court. Okay. Some things don't apply to your case.
Yeah.
But always very informative of somebody. Thanks, James Fiegel. A lot of cameras don't work. And the banks where they should work, that's where the money is.
Yeah.
Right? What was the famous bank robber said? Why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. But thanks for watching. Again, if you miss any of this show, you catch it midstream or whatever, YouTube, the Phil Jusino, my producer's looking at me smiling, the Phil Jusino Podcast. You can see all my old shows. You can see my show with Judge Tantone. You can see my show with John Ray about the Gilgo murders. You can catch this show. And also, this will be aired on Cablevision Thursday at 10 p.m., channel 115. Thanks for watching. And if you're watching it live, Merry Christmas and have a great New Year. Take care.
Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome.